My stepfather thought it was funny to try and drown me as a joke, and my mother disinherited me for reporting him. But 3 years later, my mother came back crying because he tried the same thing with his stepdaughter. As a 28-year-old man, I've hesitated to talk about this for a long time, but with everything that's happened lately, I finally feel I need to get it off my chest. This all started about 3 years ago, and just when I thought it was behind me, it somehow re-entered my life. My mother remarried when I was 19. Her new husband, Rick, was around 46 at the time. Since I was already in college when they got married, I didn't have to live with them full-time. I only visited them during holidays and breaks, trying to be as courteous as possible for my mother's sake. Rick had a way of joking that always made me uncomfortable. His humor was dark, filled with comments about violence, death, and other things that just didn't sit right with me. My mother always downplayed it, saying it was just his personality and he didn't mean it seriously. I did my best to avoid him, but I didn't think much of it. After college, I moved back to my hometown and got my own apartment about 20 minutes from where they lived. I had just started an entry-level job and was trying to save as much as possible, so I visited them often for dinner. I always offered to contribute by bringing food or helping with cooking, but Rick never missed an opportunity to make comments about me living at their expense. He would drop hints every time I was there, always acting as if I were a burden. My mother would tell me not to take it seriously, that he was just joking, but the way he said it always felt intentional, as if he meant to annoy me. Everything changed on the 4th of July. They were hosting a barbecue and about 15 people showed up. Some were Rick's relatives, others my mother's friends, and some neighbors. It was a typical summer gathering with plenty of food and drinks. Most people had been drinking for hours, though I was taking it easy because I had to drive later. Rick, on the other hand, was drinking excessively, and his jokes were becoming increasingly cruel. As always, I tried to ignore him. When it was dark and time for fireworks, most of us were gathered by the pool waiting. I was sitting on the edge with my feet in the water, checking my phone to pass the time. Without warning, Rick came up behind me and pushed me into the pool. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like a harmless joke, but for me, it was something entirely different. I was fully clothed, had my phone in hand, and worst of all, Rick knew I couldn't swim. When I was a child, I almost drowned, and ever since I've had a profound fear of water. My mother knew this, and Rick had known it for years. As soon as I fell into the water, panic overwhelmed me. I started flailing desperately, completely overcome by fear. My mind went blank. The part of the pool where I fell was about 2.5 meters deep, and I couldn't touch the bottom. Honestly, I thought I was going to die. Amidst the chaos, I heard laughter. Rick was standing at the edge, laughing as if it were the funniest thing in the world. He was saying things, but my brain processed nothing. I was too busy fighting for air. Fortunately, someone else at the party realized I was actually drowning. I believe it was my mother's friend Greta who jumped in first, and then someone else helped pull me out. I was coughing up water, trying to catch my breath, and Rick was still laughing. He kept saying I should have seen my face, that I needed to learn to take a joke. My mother was nearby looking worried, but she didn't say a word to him. It was as if she was torn between comforting me and not upsetting Rick. I told Rick he could have killed me, but he shrugged and said something like, if he had really wanted to kill me, I'd already be dead. Then he winked, turned around, and went to get another beer. I was trembling, partly from being soaked and cold, but mostly from rage and disbelief. My mother asked me to stay, saying Rick had just drunk too much and didn't mean any harm. I couldn't even look at her. I drove home in my wet clothes, my phone completely ruined by the water. The next morning, I went straight to the police station. I didn't even know if what Rick had done was technically illegal, but I felt I had to do something. The officer I spoke with told me that depending on how it was framed, it could be considered assault or even attempted homicide. Since Rick knew I couldn't swim, they took my statement and said they would investigate. As soon as my mother found out, she called me completely hysterical. She begged me to withdraw the report right then, saying it was too much over a misunderstanding and that such things could destroy a family, that it would never be the same again. Rick, according to her, was devastated that I would accuse him of something like that. I refused to back down. Regardless of whether his intention was to play a joke on me or not, what he did was reckless and dangerous, and I wasn't going to let it slide. 2 days later, Rick was arrested and charged with assault and reckless endangerment. That's when everything really started to spiral out of control. My mother lost her mind, saying I had ruined their lives. Rick worked as a contractor for a local government agency, and she was panicked that he would lose his job. She screamed at me over the phone, saying I was dead to her unless I dropped the charges. I told her that didn't work that way. It wasn't up to me anymore. The police and the prosecution were already involved. From there, everything got worse. Rick was released on bail, and my mother started turning family and friends against me. She told everyone that I was the problem, that it was a simple joke I had taken the wrong way. Some believed her, like my aunt and a couple of cousins, while others, especially those who had been at the party, supported me. The legal process, despite the witnesses, was a bit slow. Rick's lawyer tried to present everything as a misunderstanding. I had to testify at a preliminary hearing, which was one of the most stressful things I've ever done. My mother sat behind Rick the entire time, glaring at me. The judge determined there was enough evidence to go to trial. A month before the trial, Rick's lawyer offered a plea deal. Rick would plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge of reckless endangerment. In return, he would serve 30 days in county jail, complete 200 hours of community service, and attend anger management classes. The prosecution asked if I agreed, and I accepted. I didn't want to go through a full trial if it could be avoided. When Rick accepted the deal, my mother completely lost it. She showed up at my apartment screaming at me because the agreement wasn't enough for her. She wanted to clear her husband's name, which meant I should withdraw the charges, not accept a plea deal. She told me she never wanted to see me again. And that was the end. That was the last time we spoke until recently. For the past 3 years, I've had no contact with my mother. After everything that happened, she was defending her husband, so it's not like I felt bad for her. And honestly, I've been doing well. I got promoted at work. I started seriously dating someone who is now my fiancé, and I've been working through all these things in therapy. I wouldn't say I didn't miss her, especially during important moments, but I couldn't understand how she could choose a man who almost killed me over her own son. No matter how much time passed, the betrayal still hurt. 3 days ago, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my mother. She was crying so hard at first that I thought something terrible had happened. Maybe Rick had died or she was seriously ill, but then she started apologizing, frantic and desperate, saying she should have believed me, that she should have protected me, and that she was so incredibly sorry. I didn't know what to say. After 3 years of silence, it was overwhelming to hear her voice filled with remorse. But I didn't say anything, and she started to explain why she was calling. Apparently, Rick has a 16-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. I knew she existed, but she had always lived in another state with her mother, so I never met her. Recently, however, she moved in with Rick and my mother. And last week, Rick pulled the same joke on her that he did on me. He pushed her into the pool knowing she wasn't a strong swimmer. Unlike me, she didn't swallow much water and managed to reach the edge of the pool, but the experience terrified her. As soon as she got out, she called her mom, completely distraught. Now her mother is threatening to seek full custody and has already filed a police report against Rick. The police began investigating, and in the process, they found my case from 3 years ago. They contacted my mother mentioning what had happened to me, and that's when, according to her, she realized this was a pattern of Rick's. Suddenly, it wasn't just an isolated joke, but a pattern in Rick's behavior. Now she's begging me to give a statement to support her stepdaughter's case. She says she has left Rick filed for divorce and is trying to do the right thing. She keeps saying how sorry she is, that she should have believed me from the start, that she now sees who Rick really was, and that she's finally choosing me over him. But here's the reason for this post. On one hand, I want to help this girl. No one should go through what I did, especially a teenager who just wants to live her life. If my statement can help protect her, I feel it's the right thing to do. But at the same time, I'm still hurt and angry. My mother only believes me now because it happened to someone else. For 3 years, she was fine with everyone thinking I was overreacting, fine with cutting me out of her life and siding with Rick. Now that it's happened again, she suddenly wants to fix things. I find that very difficult to comprehend. I told her I needed time to think about it and would call her back. That was 3 days ago, and I still haven't done it. My fiancé believes I should give the statement but maintain firm boundaries with my mother. She tells me, helping the girl doesn't mean you have to let your mother back into your life completely. Some of my friends think I should tell my mother to fend for herself, that I owe nothing to either her or Rick after how they treated me. Update 1. I appreciate all the comments and different perspectives on the case, ranging from not getting involved to helping the stepdaughter because she was as much a victim of Rick as I was. But I've already made a decision, and here it is. After taking a couple of days to thoroughly think things through, I decided to call my mother back. It wasn't an easy decision, and I spent a lot of time deliberating whether I even wanted to hear from her, but I had to do it because I had already decided to help and needed her contact information. As soon as she answered, I could tell from her voice that she had been crying. The conversation was incredibly difficult for both of us. She broke down several times, repeatedly apologizing and saying she had been in denial about Rick's behavior for years and had preferred to believe him over me because the alternative, accepting that she had married an idiot capable of doing something like that, was too painful to face. She said she wasn't making excuses, just trying to be honest about why she acted the way she did. I told her that while I appreciated her apology, I wasn't speaking with her to forgive her or to mend our relationship. I explained that repairing a relationship so deeply damaged, likely beyond repair, is quite difficult, especially with just a simple call and a few tears. Those tears and that regret weren't there when everything happened, but only now that the truth was staring her in the face. She said she understood, which I don't know if she truly did, because she then informed me that she would give me all the time I needed and didn't expect immediate forgiveness, but simply that we could start somewhere, which wasn't what I said. Anyway, regarding Rick's daughter, I knew I had to help her. I agreed to give a statement to the police, and yesterday I spoke with a detective handling her case. I recounted in detail everything that had happened 3 years ago, explaining how Rick pushed me into the pool knowing I couldn't swim, how he laughed while I struggled to get out, and how he tried to disguise it as a joke. They already had my previous statement, but I thought they might need something new. The detective asked me some questions, and they were helpful. Apparently, Rick is once again trying to pass off the pool incident with his daughter as a misunderstanding, especially given the circumstances. It's as if he has a playbook for getting away with this kind of behavior. I also learned disturbing details about Rick's behavior towards his daughter since she moved in with them. According to the detective, this wasn't the first time he'd done something cruel disguised as a joke. There had been other incidents less physically dangerous than the pool incident, but equally damaging. He was using fear and humiliation to control her, making her feel small and helpless. The detective said that while none of the other incidents alone were enough to press charges together, they painted a picture of a man who enjoys making others feel vulnerable. My mother had also given me the stepdaughter's mother's phone number, and we ended up having a long phone conversation. She was incredibly grateful that I was willing to testify. She told me my testimony could make all the difference in ensuring Rick has very limited access to her daughter. She seemed like a genuinely concerned mother who just wants to protect her daughter from further harm. Hearing the fear and frustration in her voice reminded me a lot of how I felt after my own incident. It made me feel even more certain that I was doing the right thing by helping. It also highlighted the difference between a mother who defends her daughter and one who prefers to defend that piece of garbage named Rick instead of her own son. My apologies to anyone with that name. As for my own mother, I've agreed to see her for coffee tomorrow. She knows more about what's happened with her stepdaughter, and I want to hear it. I don't know how I'll feel seeing her face to face after all this time. My therapist believes that seeing her in person could help me process my emotions and bring closure to that part of my life. My fiancé offered to come with me for support, and while I truly appreciate it, I think this first meeting needs to be just between my mother and me. I'll update again after my meeting with my mother. Whatever happens, I now know I did the right thing by speaking up not just for myself, but for that girl who needed someone to believe her. Update 2. I met with my mother yesterday. The conversation obviously wasn't easy. She started by telling me that she had been staying with her friend Greta since she left Rick about a week ago. Yes, the same Greta who realized it wasn't just a joke and that I was drowning. She had already officially filed for divorce and also requested a temporary restraining order against him. She explained that Rick had shown up drunk and furious at Greta's house one night, making threats. She didn't go into much detail, but from the way she spoke, I knew it had scared her enough to take action. Afterwards, she told me more about what had happened with Rick's daughter, Abby. As I said, I knew she existed, but I had never met her as she had always lived with her mother in another state. About 8 months ago, she moved in with Rick and my mother, and that's when everything started to fall apart. According to my mother, Rick had been treating Abby the same way he treated me, mocking her, playing cruel jokes at her expense, and criticizing everything from her appearance to her interests and the friends she talked to. My mother admitted that she asked him several times to stop, but he always downplayed it, saying he was just joking, that it was a father-daughter thing. Over time, he started doing it behind her back, waiting to be alone with Abby to say things that made her feel small and powerless. The pool incident was the breaking point. They were having a small gathering at home, just a few people, for drinks and food. Rick had been drinking heavily, which was no surprise, and he started bothering Abby about being afraid of water. She could swim, but she wasn't a strong swimmer and felt anxious in deep water. He wouldn't leave her alone, saying she needed to toughen up. And then, without warning, he pushed her into the deep end of the pool while she was fully clothed. Abby panicked, but managed to reach the edge. She was furious and terrified. As soon as she got out, she called her mother and told her everything that had happened. That should have been the end of it, but Rick, in his usual cruel manner, decided he needed to punish her for overreacting by calling her mother to accuse him. He took away her phone, telling her she needed to learn respect. My mother was the one who finally gave her phone back and helped her pack a suitcase to leave. Abby stayed that night with a friend until her mother could travel to pick her up. It was then that her mother filed the report and began fighting for full custody. This was like traveling 3 years into the past, more or less, because it was quite similar with some differences. It was almost exactly what happened to me. The difference is that this time my mother saw it with her own eyes. I asked her why she had finally decided to leave Rick after all the years she defended him. She hesitated, and for the first time in a long time I saw true remorse in her eyes. She told me that seeing what Rick did to Abby was like watching a replay of what happened to me. But this time she couldn't lie to herself. She couldn't invent excuses or pretend it was just a misunderstanding. She had been in denial for years, convincing herself that Rick was just playing around and didn't have bad intentions, but seeing him treat a vulnerable teenager the same way shattered that illusion. She admitted that Rick had not only been cruel to me, but had also been cruel to her. He had been controlling, manipulative, and emotionally abusive, gradually isolating her from her friends and family, until she felt as though she had no one but him. I told her I was glad she was getting away from Rick, even if it was a bit late, but I also told her I wasn't there to go back to how things were before. Before we said goodbye, she asked me one more thing. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to meet Abby. Right now, Abby was at Greta's house with her, while her mother sorted out some work matters that prevented her from taking her immediately. My mother thought it might do Abby good to talk to someone who had been through a similar experience, someone who could understand what she was going through. That night, I had an appointment with my therapist and talked about all of this. He listened carefully and then suggested that meeting Abby could be a good thing for both of us. He pointed out that sometimes helping others who have experienced similar trauma can be a healing experience. It could give me a sense of closure, knowing that what happened to me could help someone else. And for Abby, knowing that someone else has survived what she's going through could make her feel less alone. I still don't know what I'm going to do. I told my mother I would think about it overnight and give her an answer tomorrow. I'll update again soon. Update 3. The last few days have been very strenuous, but having lived through them, I feel they were necessary. I decided to meet Abby. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, but I knew I couldn't ignore this situation. My fiancé came with me for support, and we met at Greta's house where my mother and she had been staying since my mother left Rick. Abby is a quiet and thoughtful teenager, and she reminded me a lot of my younger self. At first, she was quite reserved, which made sense. She's been through a lot in a short time, and now she was meeting someone who had also been hurt by the same man. But when we started talking about music, something clicked. It turns out we both play guitar, and that small connection seemed to help her relax a bit. I didn't want to pressure her to talk about Rick, but it was she who brought up the topic. She asked me what exactly had happened to me, and I told her a simpler version of the story, one that focused more on how I felt than on all the painful details. She listened attentively, nodding as I spoke, and then admitted that Rick had made her feel uncomfortable from the moment she moved in with them. The pool incident wasn't isolated, it was just the worst example of how he treated her. What impacted me most was when she blamed herself. She kept saying she should have spoken up sooner, that maybe if she had told her mother earlier how Rick treated her, none of this would have happened. It was heartbreaking to hear her because I knew exactly how she felt. I told her that none of this was her fault, that Rick was the adult and he was solely responsible for his actions. I could see she wanted to believe me, but I know from experience that stopping blaming yourself isn't something that happens overnight. While Abby and I were talking in the living room, my mother and fiancé were in the kitchen. At one point, Greta pulled me aside and told me something that caught me by surprise. Apparently, my mother had been contacting a support group for victims of domestic violence seeking help. She had also found financial documents showing that Rick had been hiding money from her for years. That explained why she had felt so trapped. She genuinely believed she couldn't afford to leave him. After a couple of hours, Abby's mother arrived to pick her up. She will take her back to her state, and they are moving forward with the custody battle. Their goal is to get full custody with no visitation rights for Rick. She thanked me for speaking with the police and for spending time with Abby. Apparently, Abby had been closing off, refusing to talk much about what happened, but after meeting me, she opened up more and seemed to be processing things better. Just that made me feel I had made the right decision by meeting her. As for Rick, things are finally catching up to him. Since he already had a conviction from my case, this second incident, so similar to what happened to me, has led to more severe legal consequences. The detective called me yesterday to update me. He is being charged with child endangerment, assault, and probation violation. He is currently in jail awaiting his bail hearing. This time, it doesn't look like he can get away with the excuse of a misunderstanding. Before I left Greta's house, my mother asked me if we could start family therapy. I told her I wasn't there for her, and that going to therapy wouldn't just solve our problems. I'm still hurt. I still don't fully trust her. I can't help but think that she chose not to believe me when everything happened, which would have been logical for a mother who also saw and knew what was going on. If they had believed me from the beginning, maybe Abby wouldn't have had to go through this. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive my mother. She had opportunities to do the right thing back then, but she chose to believe Rick over me, and that's not something I can simply forget. She may have been a victim herself, but I've known mothers who, despite being abused by their husbands, have drawn a line when it comes to their children. My fiancé, who was talking with her during my meeting with Abby, has said that she will agree with whatever decision I make. Abby and I exchanged numbers before she left, and I told her she could text me anytime if she needed to talk to someone who understood. I hope she does. I don't know when I'll update again because it will depend on something significant happening, but for now, I just want to thank everyone who gave me advice and support. Update 4. I just wanted to give everyone some closure because from the comments and private messages you've sent me, I know what matters most to you is whether Rick has finally received a fair punishment or not. I know that for many years ago he got off pretty lightly for what he did, and this was like a second chance for him to get his just desserts. I don't know if this is it. I don't know how much punishment he should receive to finally pay for everything. I don't have an exact idea, but this is what he received. The judge has given him almost 4 years in a minimum security prison for doing something similar again. And that's what we get. The other night, Abby and I were talking about all of this, and she thinks it's a good outcome. Her mother had already secured full custody, and Rick didn't even have supervised visitation rights. But now that she knows he'll go to prison for 4 years, which could be less for good behavior, he'll still get out when she's underage. And as far as she's concerned, she never plans to see her father again in her life. I think that's a good plan. Now, the next most frequent question I've been asked is whether I finally made peace with my mother, and the answer is basically no. I've already mentioned bits of my thoughts on her, but I'll summarize them here. Yes, I understand my mother was also a victim, but she could have done so much more for me at the time. I could have understood her continuing to defend him, but still keeping me in her life. It's not that I would have liked her to defend him after what he did, but let me explain this. At least then, I would have felt that she wanted me to remain a part of her life, even if she kept him as well. But by completely cutting me off, it seemed like she preferred to have only Rick and that I was secondary, tertiary, or simply worthless to her. I believe the only reason she wants me close now is because she's run out of close family. Perhaps she feels lonely or wants to share her pain with someone. But I am not a therapeutic tool stored in the garage that you use when you need it. I am not a toy that you throw away when you get bored and then expect to find intact when you remember it. So no, I do not have a relationship with my mother, and I have avoided talking to her all this time.